version of a Word document. Without doubt, ease in computing is the key that throws open a world of opportunity for people with disabilities, enabling them to realize their dreams and secure a livelihood for themselves. For Mukesh, these supportive features have allowed him to make the most of technology. In his words, computer accessibility has done for the disabled what technology has done to other users.
So that gives a quick feel for where we are today. What I want to speak to you today about is a little of the trends in technology and something that I like to call inclusive innovation. And actually, I don't think I could have been set up any better than by Stephen or Javed with the comments you made. I think you already have a sense for where we are today and perhaps some of the challenges and frustrations that are in the industry today. So I want to start off very quickly and provide some context. So Microsoft's vision is to enable people and businesses throughout the world to realize their full potential. My job at the company is to ensure that that includes everyone, regardless of their age or ability. So that's probably the best way I can summarize my position at the company. It's a worldwide position, although now that you mentioned it, I don't cover the underworld, so that's the thing I can take off my list. And this is really to this slide, is that this is not something that's specific to a particular region of the world. It's something that's worldwide. Governments around the world are trying to understand this, understanding that the right kinds of public policies can really help advance the need for accessibility and inclusion. So we have a number of issues. We have our public policies in Europe, for example. They have the Accessibility Act. In the United States, we have a federal procurement requirement called Section 508 that requires any federal agency or public organization, actually, to consider accessibility when purchasing a new product, and to compare those and to choose the product that's most accessible. So this is something that's looked at around the world, including here in India, as a possible model. There's also things happening here in India and around the world that are exciting. I mean, including, I think you mentioned the IC2, let's see, who was mentioned the ICT at schools education policy. So it's one of the examples of what is happening in India, if you've not heard about it. That is one of the examples. I'll talk about in a minute. One of the most critical challenges for us is that all of these activities around the world are harmonized, because what's most important is to ensure that every country has a compatible set of requirements, expectations, and guidelines. Your example of the movies, when they're published here, they don't have captions. When they're in the US, they do. It's also true in the UK. What would be worse is if we had different requirements and they required captioning to be done differently in different countries. That would actually hinder accessibility even more so than today. So this harmonization is a key point. But there's another key issue. That is awareness. Many people around do not understand how important this is, how many people are impacted. So here we have just a couple of examples. So when we think about vision, 1 in 4 persons. Same with mobility, 1 in 4, or dexterity. 1 in 5 people have hearing impairment or loss, and 1 in 7 have sort of learning cognitive disability. Now what's interesting is when you combine these, you end up with a very large percentage of the population. And we know that here in India, more than 7 million people have a disability. That's a huge number. So when we think about that, we're not talking about a small population. This is consistent around the world. It comes around 15%. So 1 billion people on the planet today have a disability and need this kind of adaptation or inclusion. So I think that's fairly significant. What's more interesting to me is if you think about this and you start to intersect this, what's fascinating is that many designers and engineering teams, they search for the typical user so they can design their product to work very well for that person. Well, in my opinion, that's a complete myth. There is no typical user. We're all individuals. We all have our own preferences, needs. We have our own knowledge and expectations of what technology can do for us. So this slide is really intended to demonstrate, yes, absolutely, we're talking about people who are blind or are deaf, who are blind, have a disability, maybe they're sick, bedridden. But we're also talking about aging, which is more of a concern elsewhere in the world. We're talking about very young users, so people who are new to technology and don't know how to use it yet. Equally often as someone who can't read. So giving them a text-based interface is a barrier in front of them that doesn't need to be there. And then, of course, I have a picture of our favorite American driving a car, talking on his cell phone, eating a hamburger, and who knows what else. This is not a picture for me to work. The point here, though, is that as we use technology, especially in today's world where we're on phones, we have slate devices, you have an iPad or a Windows 8 slate device, which you're all excited about. But the point is we're computing on the go. We're no longer sitting in an office with controlled lighting, controlled sound. We may be in the market on Sunday afternoon trying to buy a pair of shoes. It's very noisy, there's a lot of people, it's very exciting, but you can't use your phone if it rings. Or it may be very difficult to read the screen because there's bright sunlight on the display creating a glare. So the point here is that it's not just about disabilities. It's actually about the fact that we all need technology to adapt to us, our needs, and to our current situation that we may be in. So I could walk from a quiet room to a noisy sports arena. My needs have just changed. I want that technology to be able to adapt to that. So what that really means is the typical user is everyone. It's all about creating technology powerful enough to adapt to me and to what I need. Here I have a picture of a girl using Connect Interact. So she's waving her hands. She's not touching the machine at all, but it recognizes that she's a person. It can identify her limbs and track her and then understand. The person building the application understands and interprets those motions. To me, this is profound, not because this technology changed the way people interact with technology and with games. It is because for the first time, the computer recognizes there's a person in front of it. That's a profound shift. And I think that is the key element that is missing forever, is that it's not been about the person. We've been lost in the idea of technology and innovation and more apps, more technologies. Sort of side of the fact that the whole reason we build technology is for the person. Whether that's for entertainment, for communication, for education or employment, or many things, that really has to be the focus. So there's a few challenges that I've identified today. There's many more. But we do have the time, and I hope you remember some of this. So I've reduced it to these four. First is the way we as a global society approach the design of content and applications has to evolve. There's this concept of information overload that I use. So how many people today know how many apps are in the App Store? Does anyone know? Guess? All right. How about Google Store? 20,000. And how about in the Microsoft Phone Store? 60,000. So that's fantastic, but who cares? Wow. So what's the goal? To get to 1 million? 10 million? Fantastic. Now I have 400 applications that do my email. How does that help? Right? So it's really interesting measure. It's sort of like going to buy a car, and they tell you, wow, this can go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in the US, 3.4 seconds. Well, okay, I might not really need that every day, but I guess it's good to know that I have it. So I think the point here is that this idea around how we think about technology and how we focus our attention on technology is sometimes guided. Yes, it's great if we have a lot of customer choice. I think that's critical, actually. Sometimes it's not the most important element. It's actually more important to have the right set of applications applications on your phone, on your PC, the dozens you need so you can be successful, productive, share your ideas, be creative, and stay connected to your friends and family. It's actually not the quantity, it's about the quality. This is my point. We have to go back to the person and think about what the person really needs and wants. And also, I think it's such a complex problem today, so we're all looking for what is the right solution. Is there one thing? If we could do one thing, what would really affect accessibility? I'm happy, perhaps sad to say it's not one thing. I guess I'd say I'm sad to say it, because if it were one thing, we could go do it. In fact, we've already just heard several examples this morning about, Stephen, you talked about the fact that people who need specific or technology don't even know they exist. So there's an awareness problem as well, for sure. We talked about, sometimes technology takes a step backward. So Jeff mentioned this when he said, sometimes new technology comes on the scene that should be very helpful, but it wasn't created in a way that's accessible. So it's actually moving us a step backward. So really the key is that there's not one problem that needs to be solved. There are many, many problems, and most of these intersect. So here I've given you 3 examples. So many people think about building in assistive technology into the devices we use. That's fantastic. It's incredibly important, and I absolutely support that. And that's an important piece of the puzzle. It's not the only piece. Some people say, well, we were all building open source software. That's all, because then everyone could contribute to the solution. That's true. However, it's also much more complex. There are other challenges. Really what that comes down to is the way you build the software. It's actually less about this for the customer. My example is, I don't know who actually did the tires or the handlebars on my bicycle. In some respects, I don't really care, but I needed a bicycle that I could ride. And so the team that built my application was from one company, whether they were volunteers, whether they were from many companies or academics or researchers. In some respects, it doesn't matter. It's all about the solution in the end. And then the common one is, well, it's the cost. The economics are the problem. That's true. It's a very important problem we have to solve. However, it's also not the one problem that has to be solved. It is one of the many problems that has to be